John, I have a topic that I think you and I should talk about because it's relevant to our coaching practice. It's relevant to entrepreneurs. It's relevant to being a good friend, being a good parent, being a good spouse. The topic is listening. And I think there's a big difference. I don't think, I know there's a big difference between being quiet while someone else is talking and actually listening while someone else is talking. What I used to do, and I tell you, I am trying my hardest to not do it, is rehearse what I was going to say and wait for space in the conversation to be able to deliver it. And that would interrupt me actually listening. One of the tools that I found really helps me is if I wait a solid couple of seconds, maybe 2, 3, 5 seconds max, before I start talking, that leaves a little more room for the other person to be able to complete their thought or have another thought or continue talking. But I think we all, me included, society in general, we're so eager to be heard that we jump in the moment there's space that's created for us, a moment somebody takes a breath, a moment they pause, and we want to interject what we have to say. And I think there's real value in waiting 3 to 5 seconds after someone else is done talking before we start talking. We also get to collect our own thoughts when we do that.
One Mississippi. Two Mississippi. Rich, this happened to me recently. And it happened to me on multiple occasions recently, to the point where I was wondering if what I was doing was making the person that uncomfortable. In multiple situations with multiple different people where they spoke, I was so actively listening to what they were saying that when they were done speaking, I said, "Give me a second." And I was thinking, and I was looking up and to the right and maybe up to the left. And I was like, just give me a second. To the point where on multiple times, this has happened like just in the last couple of weeks for me, the person on the other side of the conversation said, "Just give it to me straight, John. Just don't sugarcoat it." Because what they thought I was doing in the moment was trying to sugarcoat my response. And in both instances where this happened of memory, I said, "No, I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. I just want to make sure I'm collecting my thoughts to respond to what you just said correctly." It is uncommon for people to take pause, to reflect on what's being said before they respond. To your point, it was so abnormal that they were caught off guard and were wondering why I'm trying to sugarcoat what I'm thinking. And why don't I just tell them straight what I'm thinking? And so there is this expectation that when someone's done talking, that if you don't respond, you're fabricating your response as opposed to just letting it fly. How do you handle that?
It's so funny you bring that up. By the way, have we talked about this? Have we talked about the idea of getting into what somebody else is saying so much that you forget what you were going to say? I know I've
No,
talked about it with some coaching clients. Have you and I ever talked about this?
no.
That is so ironic that you say that because I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of people about that. And I have tried to put myself in a position more and more often where I'm so into what the other person is saying that I'm not even prepared to speak when it's my turn to speak. And I have found myself doing the exact same thing that you're talking about,
Hmm.
where I go, give me a second to collect my thoughts. Give me a second to organize my thoughts. Thanks for that. Give me a moment. And asking for that pause because I'm really not prepared. I know I've really been listening deeply when I do that. If it were my preference, I don't think I want to do it every conversation. But gosh, a couple of times a day, if I'm really listening, I should have to collect my thoughts before I respond. So I think that's a good indicator for it. I find it's also helpful for me to repeat back and validate some of the things that I heard. And that does two things. First, it gives me a little bit of room to collect my thoughts because I'm not expressing my thoughts yet. I'm consolidating yours and my understanding of them. Second of all, it actually validates I understand them before I respond. Third of all, you get to feel heard if I validate what's being said. Then I can respond. So that's another tool that I'll use in addition to just pausing 3 to 5 seconds to give them more space. In this society, people don't give each other a lot of space. Everybody's got something to say. Not a lot of people want to listen. So if we can be those people who provide space for other people to think comfortably and not be interrupted and constantly jumping in, I think it's something special. The other tool you said, and I'm validating, is pause. Another tool, validate back to them what you heard. What other tools do you use either to check in on, are you actually listening, or what else do you use?
Yeah. By the way, I just want to double down on the last one you just talked about. I do this on podcasts. I know you do. I'm pretty sure I've learned this skill from you, Rich. Like, I'm pretty darn sure. The Let me just make sure I got what you just threw down here. You said this. It's a way of you going back through what the person other just said. They feel validated. And on top of that, you can also then be thinking about, okay, now that I've heard this a second time, now that you're validating what I heard was correct, you're also forming your response in the same time. So instead of saying, hey, you mind if you just pause for a second? Let me just think of what you just said. You could say, hey, before I respond to that, let me just confirm what you just said. I do that a lot. I'm pretty sure I learned that skill set from you. Another way that you could buy yourself a little bit of time, and I don't mean buy yourself some time because you need to purchase some extra time and scramble. That's not what I'm trying to say. But another way to maybe make sure you've properly heard and be present when the person's talking is to just ask some questions, as opposed to saying, hey, here's what I've heard from you, and repeat everything and say, is that correct? And they say, yes. You could say, hey, that last piece, can you elaborate on that just for a second? And as they're elaborating, you can then be, maybe now that you've heard it once, they're elaborating on a point, you can start preparing. Okay, now that I've heard this again, they're elaborating on the point, a little more detail. It can inform what I'm going to say. But I think what's really important at the end of the day, regardless of how many different methods we can come up with on how to make sure you listen, we also may need some cues. We all find ourselves at some points drifting. It could be on a Zoom call with 10 other people or 3 other people, and somebody's going on too long. And next thing, you're checking your emails and you're doing this and you're doing that. How can we prevent ourselves from drifting is really important. If you're listening to somebody and you're thinking about how to respond, that's one area. Here's some tools to make sure you don't do that. I'm seeing a lot of people now in today's world where we're dealing with Zooms and Google Meets and Teams calls or whatever platform you're on. We drift. And we're not even thinking about our response. We're thinking about what we're going to have for dinner and this email I got to get back to and this call I need to make afterwards. And we're drifting and we're not listening. So I'd love to, maybe you have some other tips on how to make sure we're listening to respond, but I also would love to ask you, have you come up with any knacks on how to make sure you're not drifting? Because that's the big area I'm seeing a lot.
I absolutely have. I've got one tool, and I believe it is, in my opinion, the number one tool. Exactly what you're doing right now. Taking a note. I can't tell you how many pages of notes I have. I could look it up right now. I probably have almost 1,000 pages of notes from our podcasts. I don't take the notes because I go back and review them on a regular basis. Now, I review them when we do our year-end review, but I don't, other than that, I'm not sure I go through my notes all that often. I'm taking the notes so I can be present in the moment, not necessarily to capture them to review later. I also do that, by the way, on my coaching calls, because it's not just drifting when it's a call with 10 people or 3 people. I find if I'm not taking notes, even on a coaching call, I might drift just one-on-one. But if I'm capturing what they're saying in my own words and I'm typing it in, and again, I rarely read those notes, but they're so important for me to take, because once I've taken that note, it sticks with me a lot longer. So I remember it. I often don't have to reread it. If I want to, it's there. But it's really a tool to keep me present and in the moment and listening. I'm going to say one other thing on you had the tool of inviting somebody to elaborate. Hey, can you tell me more about that? Or so. Another way to invite somebody to elaborate is just say one of the words that they recently said in a questioning
Tell me more.
tone.
Yeah.
So it may be, and usually it might be like a hot word. So somebody says, "Oh, I am so pissed at so and," you go, "Pissed? Yeah, super pissed. Here's what happened." If there's something that you don't understand, or there's a word that's emotional for that person, or if you just repeat that, there and it's their turn to talk next, they're going to expand on that.
Correct.
So
We had a
that's
guest that
another.
brought that to us, didn't they? I can't remember
Was
who
it?
it was. Yeah, absolutely. It was a guest who's like, "Pissed? Tell me
Who did
more."
that? Oh, you're right. I forget who it was. You're right. I do remember that. And I've used that.
Yeah.
But I haven't used it's not a manipulation thing, or it's not a but it's something for a deeper understanding instead of being a broken record. Oh, tell me more about that. Oh, can
Yeah.
you expand on that? It's just another way to invite, I want to hear more. I want to listen more deeply.
Yeah. Here's a couple other hacks that I have
I
for
love it. I
listening.
want hacks.
Close your email. I've been closing my email more often. When I'm on the podcast with you, I can't open my email. I'm not so. But one of the things I've learned, Rich, is that I can clean up my email real fast. I don't need to be surfing that. And if you close it when you're in these meetings, I think it's an effective tool to be like, you don't need it open. It's a distraction. Another email comes through and, oh, what's this thing? You have notifications turned on? No way. Get rid of your notifications for emails. First of all, you shouldn't have them on anyway, but just close down your email is one thing. The second thing that's a hack that I need to take a page out of this book myself, but it's as we're talking about it, is you got to condense A, how many meetings you have, B, condense how long they are. I think that if I'm on an hour-long Zoom call, or unfortunately an hour and a half or two or longer, if those exist, those are drift zone territories. Versus if I'm on a call with 30 minutes with somebody, we got to get something done. There's no time. There's no time to drift. We have to be succinct. We have to be clear. We have to be really tight with what we're talking about. It just prevents that stuff. I think there's a lot of waste going on that leads to drift, to not listening, to whatever else happens. There's some hacks like that I think are just so simple. They're part-time management, but they're also part of, you can bring your best self when you're not in meetings you don't need to be in, when you're in shorter meetings, so it has to be really effective. I love the idea of taking notes. Shut down your email, be present, because this means 30 minutes instead of an hour. You can get off the call and go clean up your email, but I can be present with you right now and really make this decision and talk through things. So I really think that I need to take a page of my own book. Like I'm saying, my meetings are all 1 hour long. They start on the hour, they end on the hour. I barely have time to go use the restroom. So I come back and get on the next call. My email's still open. Oh, did any emails come in while I'm talking to Rich? There's a lot of ways to just not be present. And I think the more and more that we have to be virtual, the more and more there's drifting opportunities that we need to try and avoid.
Another thing in terms of listening is listening to what's not being said.
Oh boy.
It's as powerful as what is being said. Is what are they not saying? And sometimes, as entrepreneurs, as coaches, as leaders, to bring up the topic that isn't being said and to talk about that can be one of the most powerful conversations. I think there's this global range of listening that includes looking at nonverbal communication. And when you're looking at nonverbal communication, what you're specifically looking for is a break in a pattern that you're used to with that person to see if there's connection. Particularly as an entrepreneur, let's say you're working with an employee or a client and you're saying something, you're asserting something, you're giving some type of direction. And this is somebody who often nods, makes eye contact, and then speaks immediately after you're done talking. And you notice the person is not nodding and they have pursed lips. And there's 5 or 10 seconds before they started talking. That tells you something you should be listening to in the nonverbal communication. Now, on the other side, there may be an employee who the way they listen to you, maybe they don't nod and they don't give nonverbal encouragement. And maybe they do sit there with pursed lips and that's how they think. And maybe they do collect their thoughts for 5 seconds. So when that person breaks that pattern and the person jumps in right away, or if they are giving some type of nonverbal communication and nodding or shaking their head, certainly, we want to talk about that and we know where they're at. So that's a signal. When they break a pattern of how we're used to seeing them when we're communicating, that says pause. We're not on the same page. I need to check in. And I need to check in not because I need to convince them of my opinion. I need to check in because they may know something I don't on why what I'm saying won't work or isn't right. Or maybe I need to understand what's happening in their world because they do need to understand the perspective I'm trying to share. But I'm not jumping in to try to convince or persuade. I'm trying to create this space to go, hey, what were your thoughts on that? I'm going to slow down for a quick minute.
Yeah, I love that. There's one game that people should play more to gain that skill set, and you're pretty good at it, which is poker. Right? The best poker players in the world notice something different with somebody when they're maybe don't have the cards they're pretending to have and call their bluff. That body language, be able to read somebody that's wearing sunglasses, that's trying to hide their face, that's trying to, but they just notice the way they stack their chips or the way they do something, something's off over there. Not sure what, they probably have a hot hand or they know. Being able to read, that's to your point, is a form of listening. And it's a form of just seeing what's going on. I think, I don't know about you, Rich, but I find that my gut is usually not wrong in the situation. A lot of people, myself included, feel more comfortable not saying maybe what needs to be said. So they don't say it at all. They circumvent and they say all the things that they want the people to hear. And when they get posed the question, hey, I know you talked about all of this, but you avoided talking about Jim or Sally. Why didn't you mention Jim or Sally? What are your thoughts on that? People will be truthful. But if you just take what they said and keep rolling on to the next subject and you don't hear what they didn't say, or you don't read the body language, or maybe something's off here, let me just check in on that for a second, you can miss a lot of valuable information. So it's a great point. The nonverbal listening, it's much harder. It's much harder to listen with your ears, but then also listen with your eyes and see exactly what's going on. I think you need to trust your gut sometimes. Take a pause to your point and maybe dig in a little bit deeper if something's not being said. I love that.
I think the older you and I have gotten over the course of ballpark 30 years of being around each other, the more humility we've gotten about the idea that maybe we don't always have the right answer. Funny enough, when you and I were in our mid-20s, we were more confident we always had the right answer than we probably are now.
Yep.
That's another thing that I think encourages listening, is when we can try on and remember that maybe we don't always have the right answer. And there's more information out there that you have to listen. It's the old, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them in proportion. And I feel like the older we get, the more we know that we don't know everything, and the more value there is, genuine value, in listening, because we already know our own perspective. You know what you don't know? The other person's. So we should be spending more time listening because you already know your own perspective. What are you learning when you're asserting? Not much. So if you want to learn something, we've got to listen.
Yeah. Since you brought up old age, the other part of listening is remembering.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, I very frequently will struggle with the initial remembering. I'll remember once we start talking about it again, but that's something else you got to train in your mind. I think the notes come in real handy for me on that in coaching conversations or whatnot before the call, looking back a couple of notes back. Okay. Yeah. Okay. See where we're at. Right. Because it's not that it's lost. I don't not remember the conversation or not. But as we age, I will say for myself, as I age, memory is a factor. Like just important stuff, I remember all the important, but sometimes there's conversations where it's not as important, it's not as critical, but it's important for us to retain. And I do think that journaling, taking notes, preparation, all those things play a big factor into being prepared to listen. The listener needs to be prepared sometimes to listen, because there's a lot of information that's been discussed in the past that you need to be prepared for and listening for, hearing for. So that's something that I'm doing a lot of now, is preparing myself to listen, to make sure the person doesn't have to repeat themselves with stuff we've already talked about, or areas I need to probe into, but they didn't mention this conversation, but they mentioned 3 conversations ago, but it relates to this conversation. All that preparedness, I think, is really important too, as we work with entrepreneurs that we're coaching and trying to really help them guide along their journey. Sometimes this conversation may not contain the same content as it did 3 weeks ago. So trying to catch those trends is very important as well.
I feel like this is a type of topic you and I should probably debrief on monthly. We can always work on listening.
Yeah.
This is one of those that we should probably play back for ourselves at least quarterly, if not monthly, for a bit, and just check in on, are we using the tools that we're aware of? Because sometimes we can be aware of the importance of listening, but sometimes not practice it when we don't have higher consciousness about it. So happy to have had this opportunity to engage with you on this topic, and looking forward to more topics like these coming up next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharpening my saw today, Rich. Appreciate it.